When Mara Dorsey stepped off that train into frozen Montana, she had two choices: face the wilderness that wanted her dead, or face the men who wanted her captured. She chose the mountain, but the scarred stranger waiting for her, Colt Rainer, took one look at her body and decided she wouldn't last the week. He was wrong. This is a story about a woman who refused to break, a debt written in blood, and the night everything burned. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The train's brakes screamed against frozen metal, and Mara Dorsey gripped the edge of her seat hard enough to feel her knuckles crack. Through the frost-covered window, Montana looked like the end of the world, white stretching into nothing, mountains pressing down from a sky the color of old steel. She'd been traveling for 6 days. 6 days of watching landscapes shift from city smoke to prairie grass to this vast, brutal emptiness. 6 days of sleeping with one eye open, checking every face that passed her compartment, waiting for someone to recognize her. Nobody had. Not yet. The conductor's voice rattled through the car. "Whitefish Station. Final stop." Final. The word sat in her chest like a stone. Mara stood slowly, her legs stiff from days of sitting. She pulled her coat tighter, a heavy wool thing she'd bought in Chicago, too new, too clean. Everything about her screamed outsider, the worn carpet bag in her hand, the way her dress bunched awkwardly around her hips. The fact that she was bigger than most women who traveled alone, broad-shouldered and thick through the middle in a way that made people stare. Let them stare. She'd survived worse than judgment. The cold hit her the moment she stepped onto the platform. Not the sharp bite of city winter, but something deeper, meaner, the kind of cold that found the spaces between your bones and settled there. Her breath came out in clouds. Snow crunched under her boots, and she had to plant her feet carefully to keep from slipping. The platform was nearly empty, a few rough-looking men loading cargo onto a wagon, an older woman herding 2 children toward the station house, and standing apart from everyone else, near the edge where the platform met raw wilderness. Him. Mara knew it was him before he moved, before he looked at her. Something about the way he stood, absolutely still, like the mountains behind him had grown a human shape. Tall, shoulders that stretched his coat tight across the back, dark hair that needed cutting, and a face that looked like it had been carved with a dull knife and left unfinished. Colt Rainer. She'd never seen a photograph, had only the description from the letter she'd intercepted. Hard man, mountain guide, keeps to himself, looking for a woman to help with the cabin through winter. That letter hadn't been meant for Mara. It had been meant for someone else. Someone named Sarah Connolly, a woman with a spotless reputation and impeccable references. A woman who existed on paper and nowhere else. Mara had stolen that identity the way a drowning person steals air. She forced her legs to move, crossing the platform toward him. Each step felt like a test. The snow was deeper here, and her skirts dragged through it, getting heavier. She could feel his eyes on her now, assessing, calculating. She stopped a few feet away, close enough to see the scar that ran from his left eyebrow into his hairline, close enough to see his expression, flat, unreadable, and about as welcoming as the landscape behind him. "Mr. Rainer," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He didn't respond immediately, just looked at her. His gaze traveled from her face down to her boots and back up again, slow and deliberate. Not hungry, not cruel, just measuring, like he was calculating weight and finding her lacking. "You're Sarah Connolly," he said finally. Not a question, a statement that already doubted itself. "I am." His jaw worked. "Letter said you were experienced with homestead work." "I am." "Said you'd worked in Wyoming, Montana before that." "That's right." "Letter said you were small." Mara felt heat crawl up her neck despite the cold. "It said I was capable. It said you could handle rough living, winter conditions, work that'd break most city women." His eyes hadn't left hers. They were pale gray, like dirty ice. "You look like you just stepped off a Chicago parlor floor." She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she'd spent the last 3 months sleeping in storage sheds and railway stations, that she knew exactly what rough living felt like. Instead, she lifted her chin and said, I can work. Can you? He shifted his weight, and she caught the handle of a rifle slung across his back. Because I don't have time to nursemaid someone who can't keep up. Winter's coming hard and fast, and if you can't pull your weight, you'll die. Simple as that. I'm not asking to be nursemaided. No? Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face and vanished. What are you asking then? Sanctuary, safety, a place to disappear. A job, Mara said. That's all. He studied her for another long moment. She could feel the platform beneath her feet, slick with ice. Could hear the train's engine starting to build steam again behind her. Going back east. Going back to everything she'd run from. You got other luggage? Colt asked. Just this. She held up the carpet bag. He grunted, turned without another word, and started walking toward a wagon hitched at the far end of the platform. His stride was long and sure, boots finding purchase where hers had slipped. She followed, trying to match his pace and failing. By the time she reached the wagon, her breathing was harder than it should have been. The wagon was rough-built and practical, wooden planks, iron fixtures, no decoration. A pair of heavy horses stood in the traces, their breath steaming in the cold. Colt swung her bag into the back without asking, then climbed up onto the driver's seat. Mara stared at the wagon's side. No step, no handhold, just smooth wood nearly as high as her waist. She grabbed the edge and pulled herself up. It wasn't graceful. Her skirt caught, and she had to yank it free. Her hand slipped once on the ice-slick wood, but she made it up and settled onto the bench beside him, breathing hard. Colt didn't comment. He just released the brake and snapped the reins. The horses started forward. They left Whitefish behind in minutes. The town was small, a handful of buildings clustered around the railway station, smoke rising from scattered chimneys. Then they were on a road that barely deserved the name, cutting through forest so dense the trees formed walls on either side. The silence between them stretched. Mara tried to look at the landscape instead of the man beside her, tried to find something beautiful in it, the way snow clung to pine branches, the distant peaks catching afternoon light. But mostly she just felt the cold sinking deeper and the awareness that she was alone with a stranger in the middle of nowhere. How far to the cabin? She asked finally. 3 hours, if the weather holds. She glanced at the sky. Gray clouds pressed low, and the light already looked thin. And if it doesn't? Then we camp. In this? You got a better idea? She didn't answer. The road, if it could be called that, started climbing. The wagon lurched over frozen ruts. Mara gripped the edge of the seat to keep from sliding. The trees thinned, and suddenly the world opened up on their right, a valley dropping away into nothing, mountains rising beyond it like broken teeth. You scared of heights? Colt asked. No. Good. Because the cabin's another 1,000 feet up. Mara's stomach dropped, but she kept her voice level. You live up there year-round? Someone has to. Why? He glanced at her, and for the first time something almost human crossed his face. Because it's mine. They climbed for another hour. The road got worse, narrower, steeper, sections where the wagon wheels rode inches from a drop-off that would kill them both. Colt handled it like breathing. He didn't slow down, didn't hesitate. The horses trusted him completely. Mara tried not to look down. Letter said you were widowed, Colt said abruptly. Her chest tightened. Yes. How long? 2 years. What'd he die of? The lie came easily. She'd practiced it. Fever. In Laramie. You got family? No. Friends? No. He was quiet for a moment, then, so nobody knows you're here. It wasn't a question, but Mara answered anyway. That's right. Why? Does it matter? Might. She looked at him directly. I needed work. You needed help. That's all there is. That's all, huh? His mouth pulled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Woman shows up alone, middle of winter, no family, no friends, no ties, and I'm supposed to believe that's just coincidence? Believe what you want. I intend to. The sun was starting to sink when they finally left the trees behind. The road curved around a shoulder of rock, and suddenly Mara could see the cabin. It sat on a shelf of land carved into the mountainside, a small solid structure of dark logs and stone, smoke rising from a chimney. Behind it, the mountain kept climbing, rock and snow disappearing into clouds. In front, the world dropped away. "That's it," Colt said. It looked lonely, isolated, like something built to withstand siege. Perfect. Colt pulled the wagon up beside a small barn. The horses knew the routine. They stopped without being told, already turning their heads toward shelter. He climbed down and started unhitching them. Mara got down more slowly. Her legs were stiff from sitting, and the altitude made her lightheaded. She stood there for a moment, just breathing, while Colt worked. "You planning to help?" he said without looking at her. "Or just watch?" She moved, went to the other side of the wagon and started fumbling with the harness. The leather was stiff with cold, and her fingers were clumsy. She could feel him watching her now, not helping, just waiting to see if she'd figure it out. She got the buckle loose. "Barn's there?" Colt said, nodding toward the structure. "Get them inside and brush down. I'll bring the supplies." He walked away before she could respond. Mara looked at the horses. They looked back at her with patient, knowing eyes. "Right," she muttered. "I can do this." She could. Barely. By the time she got both horses into the barn, removed their harnesses, and found the brushes, Colt had unloaded the wagon and disappeared into the cabin. The barn was warmer than outside, but still cold enough to see her breath. The horses stood calmly while she brushed them, their bodies radiating heat she wanted to press against. When she finished, she found hay in a corner stall and filled their nets, checked their water, frozen solid. She'd have to break the ice, but she didn't see a tool for it. She went looking. The barn was small but well organized. Tools hung on walls, hay stacked neat in one corner, a workbench with equipment she didn't recognize, and in the back, behind a half-open door. Mara stopped. The room was tiny, maybe 6 feet by 8, a narrow cot against one wall, a crate for a table, nothing else. The walls were rough logs, gaps chinked with mud and moss. No window, no heat source. This was where she'd sleep. She'd slept in worse. She found an iron bar hanging near the door, went back to the horses, and broke the ice in their trough. Her hands were numb by the time she finished. She could barely feel the latch when she closed the barn door behind her. The cabin door wasn't locked. She pushed it open and stepped into warmth. It hit her like a wall. The heat from the fireplace, the smell of wood smoke, and something cooking. The cabin was one large room with a sleeping loft above. A table, chairs, shelves, a cook stove in the corner, currently radiating heat, everything clean and spare and functional. Colt stood at the stove, stirring something in a pot. He didn't turn around. "Horses settled?" he asked. "Yes." "You break the ice in the trough?" "Yes." "Find your quarters?" Mara paused. "In the barn?" "That's right." She'd expected it. Didn't make it easier to hear. "Understood." He did turn then, looked at her standing just inside the door, snow melting off her coat, hands red with cold. His expression didn't change. "There's rules here," he said, "and you're going to follow them." "What rules?" "First, you pull your weight. No excuses, no exceptions. You can't do the work. You leave." "I can do the work." "Second, what's mine stays mine. That means this cabin, that loft, my supplies unless I say otherwise. You stay in the barn, you eat what I give you, and you don't touch anything without asking." Mara felt anger flicker but kept it down. "Anything else?" "Third," he moved toward her, and she had to fight the urge to step back. He stopped a few feet away. "You lie to me again, and I put you back on that train myself. I don't care how far you ran or who you're running from. You're straight with me, or you're gone." Her pulse spiked. "I haven't lied." "Haven't you?" His eyes held hers. "Sarah Connolly's real. I checked. She worked in Wyoming, just like the letter said. But she died last spring. Pneumonia." The room felt smaller suddenly. "So I'll ask one more time," Colt said quietly. "Who are you?" Mara's mind raced. She could run, out the door, into the dark, take her chances in the wilderness. She could lie again, claim mistaken identity, confusion, anything. Or she could— "Mara," she said. The truth tasted strange. "My name is Mara Dorsey." "And the rest of it?" There was a debt. My father's debt. He died before he could pay it. So? So the man who held the debt decided I could pay instead. Her voice stayed level, flat. He said I belonged to him now, that he'd come collect when he was ready. Colt's expression didn't change. And you ran? Yes. How long ago? 3 months. He looking for you? Yes. How hard? Hard enough. Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. Outside, wind had started to pick up, rattling something against the cabin wall. Why here? Colt asked finally. Because it's the edge of nowhere, Mara said. Because nobody looks for anyone up here. Because I saw that letter and I thought... She stopped, started again. I thought maybe I could disappear. Can't disappear forever. I can try. He looked at her for a long time. She couldn't read his face, didn't know if he believed her, if he'd help her, if he was already calculating how to get her off his mountain. You really work homesteads? He asked. Some, not much. You know how to split wood, haul water, skin game? I can learn. Learning takes time. Winter doesn't wait. Then I'll work harder. Well, something shifted in his expression, not warmth, but acknowledgement. Harder won't matter if you're not smart about it. You push too hard up here. This altitude, this cold, your body will quit whether you want it to or not. I'm stronger than I look. I doubt that. He turned back to the stove. But I guess we'll find out. He dished stew into 2 bowls, handed her one without ceremony. Eat, then get some sleep. We start at first light. Start what? Finding out if you can actually survive. The barn was colder at night than Mara expected. She lay on the narrow cot, wrapped in the 2 blankets Colt had given her. Wool, heavy, but not enough. Her breath fogged the air above her face. Every time she shifted, the cold found new places to settle. She could hear the horses breathing in the main part of the barn. Slow, steady, somehow peaceful. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt peaceful. 3 months of running had worn her down to bone and will. 3 months of looking over her shoulder, jumping at shadows, trusting nobody. She'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. Her hands had calluses now. Her feet had blisters that had healed and broken and healed again. And still, the thought of Marcus Greer finding her made her chest tight with fear. She'd been 17 when her father borrowed money from Greer, 20 when he died and left her holding the debt, 21 when Greer came to collect. You're mine now, he'd said, body and soul. You'll come when I call, and you'll do what I say, or I'll hunt you down and make you wish you'd never been born. She'd smiled, nodded, promised to wait for him. Then she'd run. He wouldn't stop looking. Men like Greer never stopped. But maybe up here, in this frozen nowhere, she'd bought herself time. Mara closed her eyes and tried to sleep. Colt woke her before dawn by pounding on the barn door. Up, he shouted. Daylight's burning. Mara stumbled out of bed, every muscle stiff. Her breath came out in clouds. She pulled on her dress with numb fingers, wrapped her coat tight, and pushed open the door, still dark outside. Stars scattered across black sky. Colt stood in the yard with a lantern, already dressed, already moving. You're late, he said. The sun's not even up. Sun doesn't feed the stock. He thrust a bucket at her. Water's frozen again. Break the ice, fill this, bring it to the horses. He walked away before she could respond. Mara looked at the bucket, at the pump across the yard, at the sky that showed no signs of lightning. She started walking. The pump handle was frozen solid. She had to work it back and forth, until her shoulders burned and finally, water started flowing. Ice cold. She filled the bucket and carried it back to the barn, water sloshing over the rim and soaking her skirt. The horses drank while she watched, shivering. Now muck the stalls, Vit, Colt said from behind her. She turned. He stood in the doorway with a pitchfork. I need to... She gestured vaguely at herself, her soaked skirt, her frozen hands. You need to work. He set the pitchfork against the wall. Or you need to leave. Which is it? Mara grabbed the pitchfork. She'd never mucked a stall before. It showed. The pitchfork was heavy and awkward in her hands. The manure was frozen in places, impossible to lift. By the time she filled the first wheelbarrow, sweat ran down her back despite the cold. "Where does this go?" she called. "Muck pile, behind the barn." She wheeled the barrow outside. The ground was uneven and icy. The wheel caught on a frozen rut, and the whole thing tipped, spilling half the load. From somewhere nearby, she heard Colt make a sound that might have been disgust. She righted the barrow and kept going. By the time the stalls were clean, the sun had finally risen, pale and weak through gray clouds. Mara's hands were raw. Her back ached. She could barely grip the pitchfork anymore. Colt appeared in the barn door. "Done?" "Yes." He walked past her, inspecting the stalls. His face showed nothing. "It'll do," he said finally. "Now come help with the wood." The wood pile was on the far side of the cabin, logs stacked taller than Mara's head. Colt had already started splitting, the axe rising and falling with mechanical precision. Each swing split the log clean through. "Your turn," he said, offering her the axe. It was heavier than she expected. She could barely lift it over her head. "Like this," Colt said. He took the axe back, positioned a log on the stump. "Let the weight do the work. Don't fight it." He swung. The log split. He handed her the axe again. Mara positioned a log, lifted the axe, brought it down, and missed completely. The axe buried itself in the stump. "Again," Colt said. She tried, and missed. Tried again, missed again. "Stop." Colt moved behind her. "You're swinging wild. Control the path." He didn't touch her, but she could feel him there. Close enough to feel his presence, close enough to feel judged. She swung again. This time the axe hit the log but bounced off without splitting it. "Better," Colt said. "Keep going." She split exactly 3 logs in the next hour. Colt split 30. Goats. By midday, Mara could barely stand. Everything hurt. Her shoulders, her back, her hands. Places she didn't know could hurt. She sat on the cabin steps, trying to catch her breath while Colt worked nearby, fixing a broken fence rail. "You planning to sit there all day?" he called. "I'm resting." "You've been resting for 20 minutes. I split wood for an hour. You split 3 logs." He didn't look up from his work. "At this rate, we'll freeze before March." Anger flared hot in her chest. "I'm doing my best." "Your best isn't good enough." "Then teach me." Now he did look up. "I am teaching you. I'm teaching you that soft hands and city living don't mean shit up here. Either you get strong or you die. That's the lesson." "I am strong." "Are you?" He stood, walked toward her, stopped close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. "Because from where I'm standing, you can barely lift an axe. You can't work a pump. You spilled half the manure cart. And it's only the first day." "Give me time." "Winter won't." "Then what do you want me to do?" Mara stood even though her legs shook. "Tell me what you want, and I'll do it." "I want you to be what you claim to be, experienced, capable, strong enough to survive." "I never claimed to be strong enough. I claimed I could learn." "Same difference." "It's not. It is." His voice was flat, final. "Because learning takes time and mistakes up here kill people. You understand that? One mistake, leaving the barn door open, letting the fire die, going out in a storm, and you're dead. No second chances, no room for error." Mara's hands clenched. "I understand." "Do you? Because you're standing here arguing instead of working, and the stock still needs feeding, and there's snow coming tonight that'll bury this whole mountain if we're not ready. So tell me what to do. Prove you can handle what I've already given you." They stared at each other. Mara's chest heaved. Colt's expression stayed carved from stone. Finally, he turned away. "Feed's in the barn," he said. 2 scoops per horse. Don't overfeed them, and don't let the chickens out. There's a fox been sniffing around." He walked back to his fence without another word. Mara stood there shaking, from exhaustion, from anger, from the horrible certainty that he was right. She wasn't strong enough, not yet, but she would be. She had to be. The snow started just after dark. Mara had finished feeding the animals and retreated to her room in the barn, too exhausted to eat the bread and cheese Colt had left for her. She lay on the cot, every muscle screaming, listening to snow hiss against the walls. Outside, wind howled. She thought about Chicago, about warm rooms and full meals and beds that didn't feel like sleeping on stone. About her old life, the one before debt, before running, before learning that safety was a lie people told themselves. She thought about Greer, wondered if he was looking for her tonight, wondered if he'd given up, or if he was offering bounties, spreading her description across every town between here and Missouri. Big woman, brown hair, scared eyes. No, not scared anymore, tired, angry, desperate, but not scared. The barn door creaked open. Mara sat up fast, heart pounding. Through the gap in her door, she saw Colt's shadow, tall and solid, moving between the stalls, checking the horses, making sure everything was secure against the storm. He didn't come to her door, didn't speak, just did his work and left, the barn door closing behind him with a solid thunk. Mara lay back down. Outside, the wind screamed and the mountains settled in for winter. And somewhere in the darkness, Mara Dorsey closed her eyes and made herself a promise. She would survive this. Whatever it took. She would survive. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of wind that shook the barn walls and snow that piled so high, Mara had to dig her way out each morning just to reach the cabin. 3 days of work that never stopped. Feeding animals, hauling water, splitting wood, shoveling paths that filled again within hours. Colt worked alongside her, but never with her. He was always 10 steps ahead, finishing tasks before she'd figured out how to start them. He didn't offer help, didn't slow down, just kept moving with the steady rhythm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Mara fell behind, every single day. On the 4th morning, the wind finally died. She woke to silence, absolute and strange after days of howling. Her body ached in new places. Her hands were cracked and bleeding despite the salve Colt had grudgingly given her. She could barely make a fist. But she got up. Always she got up. Outside, the world had transformed. Snow covered everything in thick white silence. The path to the cabin was gone. The woodpile was buried. Even the barn door had snow packed against it so high she had to dig for 20 minutes just to push it open. Colt was already in the yard shoveling. "About time," he said without looking up. Mara grabbed the spare shovel leaning against the cabin wall, started clearing the path he'd already started. Her shoulders protested with every movement. She ignored them. They worked in silence until the sun was fully up. "Stock needs feeding," Colt said, straightening. His breath came out in clouds, but he wasn't breathing hard, wasn't even sweating. "Then we check the roof for damage." "The roof?" "Snow load. Gets heavy enough, it'll cave in the barn." "How do we—" "Climb up and shovel it off. How else?" He walked away before she could ask more questions. Mara fed the animals, then stood staring at the barn roof. It was steep and slick with ice, a good 12 feet off the ground at its lowest point. She couldn't see any way up that wouldn't end with her falling and breaking something important. "You coming?" Colt called from above. She looked up. He was already on the roof, shovel in hand, clearing snow with efficient swings. "How did you get up there?" "Ladder. West side." She found it, a rough wooden ladder tied to the barn wall. Tested the first rung. It held. She started climbing and immediately regretted it. The ladder swayed with each step. Her hands were too cold to grip properly. Halfway up, her foot slipped and she had to hug the ladder tight, heart hammering. "Don't fall," Colt said helpfully from above. "Wasn't planning on it." "Plans don't mean much when you're sliding off a roof." She made it to the top, pulled herself onto the roof with shaking arms. The surface was worse than she'd imagined, sloped and icy and covered with 2 feet of heavy, wet snow. "Stay near the peak," Colt said. He was already working his way down the far side, shoveling snow over the edge. "And don't put all your weight on one foot. Snow shifts, you'll go with it." Mara started shoveling. Each movement felt precarious. The roof was slick under the snow, and more than once she felt her feet start to slide. She had to move slowly, testing each step, while Colt worked twice as fast beside her. "You're thinking too much," he said. "I'm thinking about not dying." "Same thing up here. You think you freeze up, you make mistakes. So I should just stop thinking? You should trust your body to know what to do. My body wants to go back to bed." Something that might have been a smile crossed his face. "Yeah, mine too." It was the most human thing he'd said to her. They cleared the roof in silence after that. When they finally climbed down, Mara's legs were shaking so hard she nearly fell off the ladder. Her hands had gone numb somewhere in the middle, and now the feeling was coming back in sharp, painful waves. "Go warm up," Colt said, nodding toward the cabin. "I'll finish the stock." It was the first time he'd let her stop working before the task was done. Inside the cabin, heat from the stove hit her like a wall. She stood in front of it, trying to get feeling back in her hands. The pain was intense, like needles driving under her skin. She bit down hard and waited for it to pass. The cabin door opened behind her. "Hands hurt?" Colt asked. "No." "You're lying." "I'm fine." He crossed to a shelf, pulled down a tin, and brought it to her. "Put this on. It'll help." The salve smelled like pine and something bitter. She rubbed it into her cracked skin, wincing. "You did good today," Colt said. Mara looked up, surprised. "Roof work's dangerous," he continued. "Most people freeze up their first time. You didn't." "I froze up plenty." "But you didn't quit." He took the tin back, returned it to the shelf. That counts for something. It was the closest thing to praise she'd gotten from him. "Thank you," she said. He grunted, turned back to the stove. "Don't let it go to your head. You're still slow as mud, and winter's barely started." But when he handed her a bowl of stew a few minutes later, the portion was bigger than usual. The next week passed in a blur of work and exhaustion. Mara's body started to adapt. Her hands toughened, her shoulders got stronger, her breathing adjusted to the thin mountain air. She could split wood now without missing the log entirely, could haul water without spilling half of it, could muck the stalls in half the time it had taken that first day. Colt noticed. He didn't say anything, but the tasks he gave her got harder, more complex. He taught her how to check the horses for signs of illness, how to repair broken tack, how to read the sky for coming weather. "Red sky at morning," he said one dawn, pointing east. "Storm's coming." "How long?" 6, maybe 8 hours. "What do we need to do?" "Everything." He started listing tasks. Extra feed for the stock, woodpile needs to be closer to the cabin, water barrels filled, windows shuttered, and we need to check the trap lines before it hits. "Trap lines?" "How do you think we eat when supplies run low?" He was already moving toward the barn. "Come on, I'll show you." The traps were spread across 2 miles of forest. Colt had set them along game trails near water sources, in places where animals moved through regularly. He checked each one with practiced efficiency, resetting the ones that hadn't caught anything, collecting the ones that had. Mara tried not to look at the animals, rabbits mostly, one fox. Their bodies were frozen solid, eyes still open. "Can't afford to be squeamish up here," Colt said, watching her face. "I'm not squeamish." "You look green." "I'm fine." He handed her a rabbit. "Then you can carry this one." The body was stiff and cold. Mara held it by the feet, trying not to think about how it had died. They were on the last trap when Colt stopped abruptly. "What?" Mara asked. He held up a hand, listening. Then she heard it too. Hoofbeats, coming up the mountain road. Colt's whole body changed. Everything about him went still and hard. "Back to the cabin," he said quietly. "Now!" "Who? Move!" They ran. Well, Colt ran. Mara did her best to keep up, crashing through snow, her lungs burning. By the time they reached the cabin, her vision was spotted with black. "Inside," Colt said. He was already pulling his rifle down from above the door. "And stay there." "What's happening?" "Someone's coming up the mountain. This time of year, that's never good." "Maybe it's just a traveler." "Nobody travels up here in winter unless they're looking for something." His eyes met hers. "Or someone." Mara's stomach dropped. "Get in the barn," Colt said. "Your room. Don't come out until I say." "What if it's—" "I said get in the barn." She went. Ran across the yard and into the barn, into her tiny room. Pulled the door almost closed and pressed her eye to the crack, watching. Colt stood in the yard, rifle held loose but ready. Waiting. The rider appeared a few minutes later. He was alone. A big man on a big horse, wearing a heavy coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. He rode into the yard like he owned it, taking in the cabin, the barn, Colt standing there with his gun. "Help you?" Colt called. The man stopped his horse. When he smiled, Mara could see it even from the barn, wide and white and completely empty. "Maybe," the man said. His voice carried easy across the snow. "Looking for someone. Thought maybe you'd seen her. Don't see many people up here. This one's hard to miss. Big woman, dark hair, probably traveling alone." The man shifted in his saddle. "Goes by different names. Might have said she was Sarah Connolly." Mara's heart stopped. "Don't know anyone by that name," Colt said. His voice stayed level. Bored, almost. "No? That's strange." The man pulled a paper from his coat. "Because I got a letter right here, sent to Colt Rainer at this address, requesting a woman named Sarah Connolly for winter work. You are Colt Rainer, aren't you?" "I am." "So where's Sarah?" "Never showed. Sent a telegram saying she changed her mind." "Did she now?" The man's smile didn't shift. "Mind if I look around, just to be sure?" "Yes, I mind." "Now that's not very neighborly." "We're not neighbors. You're on my land and I'm asking you to leave." The man studied Colt for a long moment. Then he looked past him, toward the barn. Mara shrank back from the crack in the door, heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "See, here's the thing," the man said. "I got paid good money to find this woman, and I'm real good at my job. So if she's up here, and I think she is, I'm going to find her. Question is whether you want to make that easy or hard." "I told you, she's not here." "You told me a lot of things." The man's hand moved toward his coat. "But I don't think I believe you." Colt's rifle came up smooth and fast, not aiming, just ready. "That's far enough," he said. The man froze. His smile finally faded. "You really want to do this?" "I really want you off my mountain." "Over some woman you claim not to know?" "Over my property, my privacy, and my patience, which you just ran out of." They stared at each other. Mara couldn't breathe, couldn't move. She watched through the crack as the man's hand hovered near his coat, as Colt's finger rested on the trigger, as the whole world balanced on the edge of violence. Then the man laughed. "All right," he said, raising his hands. "All right. I can respect a man defending his land." He gathered his reins. "But you should know, Marcus Greer doesn't give up. He wants this woman bad enough to send me. He'll send others. Enough of them. Eventually one's going to get past you." "Let them try." "Oh, they will." The man turned his horse. "Enjoy the rest of your winter, Mr. Rainer. Something tells me it's going to be real interesting." He rode away slowly, deliberately, like he had all the time in the world. Colt didn't lower the rifle until the man was out of sight. Even then, he stood in the yard for another 10 minutes, watching the road. Finally, he turned toward the barn. "Mara," he called, "get out here." She emerged on shaking legs. Colt looked at her, and whatever small warmth had been building between them over the past week vanished completely. "Inside," he said. "Now." She followed him into the cabin. He set the rifle down, then turned to face her. His expression was carved from stone. "Marcus Greer," he said. Not a question. "Yes." "The man you owe the debt to?" "Yes." "The man hunting you?" "Yes." Colt's jaw worked. "You could have told me he was sending bounty hunters." "I didn't know." "You didn't know? Or you didn't want to know?" He took a step toward her. "Because there's a difference, Mara. There's a big damn difference between running from debt and running from a man rich enough to hire professional trackers. What difference does it make?" "It makes the difference between you being a problem and you being a threat." His voice was rising. "That man out there? He knows you're here now. He didn't see you, but he knows. And he's going to tell Greer, and Greer's going to send more men, better men, and they're not going to be polite about it. So what do you want me to do?" Mara's own anger was building now. "Leave? Go back down the mountain so they can take me?" "I want you to have been honest from the start." "I was honest. I told you there was a debt. You told me half a truth, and you know it." He turned away, running a hand through his hair. "This is exactly what I didn't want. Exactly why I live up here alone. Because people bring their problems with them, and those problems have a way of getting everyone killed. Nobody asked you to protect me." "No?" He turned back and something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Then what the hell do you think just happened out there? You think I pointed a rifle at a bounty hunter for fun? Mara opened her mouth, closed it. She didn't have an answer. Here's what's going to happen, Colt said after a moment. His voice had gone cold, controlled. You're going to stay out of sight. You don't go outside unless I say so. You don't show yourself to anyone who comes up this mountain. And when spring comes, the minute the snow melts enough for travel, you're gone. Understand? Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem. But I said, do you understand? Mara met his eyes, saw no give in them, no compromise. Yes, she said quietly. I understand. Good. He grabbed his coat. I'm checking the perimeter. Make sure he actually left. Stay inside. He walked out, slamming the door behind him. Mara stood in the empty cabin, listening to her own breathing. The fire crackled. Outside, wind had started to pick up. The storm Colt had predicted, right on schedule. She sat down at the table and put her head in her hands. 3 months of running, and they'd still found her. Of course they had. Men like Greer always found what they were looking for. They had money, resources, patience. All she had was stubbornness. And now she'd dragged Colt into it. The man who'd saved her, even if he didn't want to admit it, even if he was angry about it. He'd stood in that yard with a rifle and protected her anyway. Why? She didn't know. Didn't know if she'd ever understand why some people helped and others hunted. Why Colt had chosen to lie for her when it would have been easier to just hand her over. The door opened. Colt came back in, snow dusting his shoulders. He's gone, he said. For now. Mara didn't respond. Colt shed his coat, moved to the stove, started preparing food with movements that were too controlled, too precise. You hungry? He asked without looking at her. No. You should eat anyway. I'm not... Mara. He finally looked at her. Some of the anger had drained from his face, leaving only exhaustion. Just eat something, please. So she did. They ate in silence. The storm hit full force, wind screaming around the cabin. Snow began to pile against the windows. How long will this last? Mara asked finally. Day or two, maybe. And after? After, we hope he doesn't come back with friends. And if he does? Colt was quiet for a long moment. Then we deal with it. We? I don't leave people to freeze. His mouth twisted. Even when they lie to me. I'm sorry, Mara said, and meant it. He nodded, just once. Acknowledgement without forgiveness. They finished eating. Colt cleaned the dishes. Mara sat by the fire, watching snow pile higher against the windows. Tell me about him, Colt said abruptly. Who? Greer. Mara's hands tightened in her lap. What do you want to know? Everything. If I'm going to help you survive this, I need to know what we're up against. So she told him. Told him about her father, a gambler who thought he could beat the odds and died owing money to half of St. Louis. Told him about Greer, who held the largest debt and decided a dead man's daughter was acceptable payment. Told him about the night Greer came to collect, the things he'd said, the way he'd looked at her like she was property he'd already purchased. He gave me a week to settle my affairs, Mara said. Her voice stayed flat, emotionless. Said he'd come back and I'd go with him. Said I'd work off the debt however he saw fit. Work off how? He didn't specify, didn't need to. Colt's jaw tightened. So I ran, Mara continued. Took what little money I had and headed west. Changed my name 3 times. Slept in train stations. Did whatever work I could find. She looked at him. And then I saw that letter. Why didn't you just keep running? Because there's nowhere left to run. Greer has connections everywhere, money everywhere. Sooner or later, he was always going to find me. She swallowed. At least up here, I thought I might have a chance. A chance to what? Disappear, completely. You can't disappear from a man like that. I can try. Colt stood, walked to the window, stared out at the storm. There's another option. What? Fight back. Mara almost laughed. Fight Marcus Greer? With what? I have no money, no weapons, no... You have me. She stopped, stared at him. He turned from the window. I don't like being threatened on my own land. Don't like men riding up here thinking they can take whatever they want. And I really don't like the idea of handing you over to someone who thinks he owns you. So what are you saying? I'm saying we make a plan. We figure out how to keep you alive until spring, and then we figure out how to make Greer leave you alone for good. He won't. He will if we make it too expensive, too dangerous, too much trouble. Colt's eyes were hard. Every man has a breaking point. We just need to find his. Hope flickered in Mara's chest. Dangerous, fragile hope. Why would you do this? She asked. Because I'm tired of running too. From what? His expression closed. That's not your concern. You're asking me to trust you with my life. I think it is my concern. They stared at each other. I was a soldier, Colt said finally. Did things I'm not proud of. Came up here to get away from all that, from people, from orders, from... He stopped. Doesn't matter. Point is, I know what it's like to have someone hunting you, to feel like there's nowhere safe. And you think we can win? I think we can survive. And sometimes that's the same thing. The storm raged outside. The fire crackled. And somewhere in the space between them, something shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the possibility of it. All right, Mara said. What's the plan? Colt smiled. It was a dangerous expression. First, we make you invisible. No tracks, no signs, nothing that says you're here. As far as anyone knows, I'm still alone on this mountain. And second, we prepare for them to come back, because they will. And when they do, he moved to the shelf, pulled down a second rifle, held it out to her. You're going to know how to fight. Mara took the rifle. It was heavy and cold in her hands. I don't know how to shoot. You will. What if I can't? You will, he said again, certain. Because the alternative is letting them take you, and I don't think you came all this way just to give up now. He was right. She hadn't. The next morning, after the storm passed, Colt started training her. They began with the rifle. He showed her how to hold it, how to sight down the barrel, how to control her breathing before she pulled the trigger. The first time she fired it, the kick nearly knocked her over. Again, Colt said. She fired again, and again. Her shoulders started to bruise from the recoil. Again. By the end of the first week, she could hit a tree trunk from 50 yards. By the end of the second week, she could hit a specific branch. You're getting better, Colt admitted one evening. Still not fast enough. Speed comes with practice. Right now, focus on accuracy. They also worked on stealth. How to move through snow without leaving obvious tracks. How to hide signs of her presence in the cabin. How to disappear into the forest if someone came. If they find you outside, Colt said, you run for the tree line. North Ridge, there's a hollow there, hidden by rocks. You know it? I think so. Not good enough. I'll show you tomorrow. He did. Made her run the route a dozen times until she could find it with her eyes closed. Made her practice hiding, staying still for hours, even when the cold bit deep. You move, you die, he said. Remember that. Mara remembered, but it wasn't all grim preparation. Sometimes in the evenings after work was done, they'd sit by the fire and Colt would talk. Not about his past, he kept that locked tight, but about the mountain, the animals, the way the seasons changed. Spring's the hardest time, he said one night. Everything melting, ground turning to mud. Avalanches come out of nowhere, creek floods. Animals wake up hungry and mean. And summer? Short, beautiful, gone before you know it. You ever think about leaving? Every day. But you don't. He shrugged. Where would I go? Anywhere. Town, city, somewhere with people. People are the problem, Mara. Haven't you figured that out yet? She had. She just didn't want to believe it. Another week passed. Then another. The bounty hunter didn't return, but Mara felt his presence anyway, a weight on the back of her neck, the constant sense of being watched. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow looked like a man on horseback. Colt noticed. You're getting paranoid, he said one morning. I'm being careful. There's a difference. Is there? He stopped splitting wood, looked at her. Yeah, careful keeps you alive. Paranoid makes you stupid. I'm not. You are. You're so busy looking over your shoulder, you're not watching where you're going. That's how people get hurt. So what am I supposed to do? Just pretend nobody's hunting me? No, you're supposed to stay alert without losing your mind. He set down his axe. You want to survive this? Then you need to be smart, cold. You need to think like they think. And how do they think? Like you're prey, like you're weak, like you'll make a mistake. His eyes held hers. Prove them wrong. She tried to channel fear into focus, to let the work ground her, to trust that she was getting stronger, smarter, harder to catch. But late at night, alone in her room in the barn, the fear came back, heavy and choking. She'd lie awake listening to the wind and thinking about Greer, about his smile, about what he'd do when he finally caught her, if he caught her. She was done running. Whatever came next, she'd face it standing still. February came with cold so deep it made the previous weeks feel like practice. The kind of cold that froze breath before it left your mouth, that turned exposed skin black in minutes, that killed anything caught outside after dark. Mara had stopped counting days. Time moved differently up here, measured in storms survived, wood split, water hauled. She was stronger now. Her hands had calluses thick as leather. Her shoulders didn't ache after splitting wood. She could work a full day without needing to stop every hour. Colt still outworked her, but the gap had narrowed. You're getting slow, she said one afternoon, hauling a load of wood past him. He looked up from the fence he was repairing. Something like amusement crossed his face. That's so. I've been watching. You used to lap me twice before breakfast. Now it's only once. Maybe I'm going easy on you. Or maybe you're getting old. He snorted. Actually snorted. I'm 34. Ancient. How old are you? 22. Child. Mara grinned despite herself. These moments had become more common lately, brief flashes of something almost like friendship. They didn't talk about the bounty hunter, didn't talk about Greer, didn't talk about spring coming and what would happen then. They just worked. And sometimes they almost forgot why she was hiding. The rider came back on a Tuesday. Different man, same purpose. Mara was in the barn when she heard the horse. She froze, pitchfork in hand, every muscle going tight. Colt appeared in the doorway seconds later. Inside. Now. Is it? Move! She dropped the pitchfork and ran for her room, pressed herself against the wall beside the door, heart hammering. Through the crack, she could see Colt checking his rifle. His face was stone. Stay quiet, he said without looking at her. No matter what you hear. He left. Mara counted her breaths. 1, 2, 3. Outside, she heard the horse stop, heard boots hit the ground. Afternoon, a voice called. Deeper than the last man. Rougher. Help you? Colt's voice carried back, flat and unfriendly. Maybe. Name's Dane Cutter. I'm looking for someone. Lot of people looking for someone up here lately. That's so. A pause. Then maybe you can save us both some time. Woman I'm after goes by Mara Dorsey, maybe Sarah Connolly. Big woman, dark hair. Ring any bells? No. You sure about that? Because I got information says she came this way, and you're the only thing up this mountain. Your information's wrong. Is it? Footsteps. Coming closer to the barn. Mind if I look around, just to be certain? I do mind. Now see, that makes me suspicious. Man's got nothing to hide. He usually doesn't mind a quick look. Man's got property rights, usually doesn't appreciate strangers poking around uninvited. Mara's hand found the rifle leaning against the wall. Colt had taught her to keep it loaded, keep it close. Her palms were sweating despite the cold. Fair enough, Cutter said. But here's my problem. I came a long way in bad weather on someone's word. This woman was up here. Now, I could turn around, ride back down, tell my employer I didn't find nothing, but that'd make me look bad, and I don't like looking bad. Not my problem. Could be. See, way I figure it, you got 3 choices. 1, you let me search. I don't find her. I leave. 2, you tell me where she is, save us both trouble. Maybe I forget to mention you were harboring her. 3, the voice went cold. We do this the hard way. Or 4, Colt said quietly. You get back on that horse and ride down before I put a bullet in you. Silence. Mara's finger found the trigger. She didn't remember moving it there. You threatening me? Cutter asked. I'm informing you. There's a difference. Over some woman you claim not to know? Over my land, my privacy, and my patience, which you just about burned through. More footsteps. Cutter was moving around the yard now. Mara tracked the sound. He was circling toward the barn. Nice setup you got here, Cutter called. Quiet. Isolated. Good place to hide someone. Good place to be left alone. That what you want? To be left alone? It's what I came up here for. Funny thing about that, Cutter's voice was closer now, right outside the barn. Man wants to be alone, usually doesn't advertise for help, but you did. Posted a letter looking for a woman to work the winter. Sarah Connolly, same name my woman's using. She never showed. You said that already, but you know what I think? The barn door creaked. I think you're lying. Mara's breath stopped. Step away from that door, Colt said. His voice had gone deadly quiet. Or what? Or I drop you where you stand. You really want to die over this? Question is whether you do. Another silence. Longer this time. Mara's hand shook on the rifle. She could see Cutter's shadow through the crack in her door. Tall, broad, moving with the confidence of someone used to violence. Then the shadow retreated. All right, Cutter said. All right. I can respect a man defending his property, but you should know Marcus Greer's offering $1,000 for this woman, alive and unharmed. That's a lot of money to turn down. I don't need money. Everyone needs money. Not enough to sell out someone I don't even know, Cutter laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. You know her. I can see it in how hard you're fighting, but that's fine. I got time. Winter's long, and I'm patient. Get off my mountain. I'm going, but I'll be back, and next time I won't ask permission. Footsteps. The horse. Hoofbeats fading down the trail. Colt didn't move for a full 5 minutes after the sound disappeared. Finally, he called out. He's gone! Mara emerged on shaking legs. Colt was standing in the yard, rifle still raised, staring at the empty trail. He knows, Mara said. Yeah. He's coming back. Yeah. With others, probably. Colt lowered the rifle, looked at her. Probably. So what do we do? What we've been doing. Prepare. He started walking toward the cabin. Come on. We need to talk. Inside, Colt poured them both coffee with hands that were almost steady. Almost. He was probing, Colt said, testing to see how hard I'd fight, how much I knew. And now he knows I'll kill for you, which means next time he won't talk first. Mara's stomach twisted. I should leave before what? Before he comes back and finds you alone on the trail? That's what he wants. He wants you scared enough to run. I'm not running. Good. Because we need you here. He set his cup down. I got an idea. It's risky, but it might buy us time. What kind of idea? Colt met her eyes. We make you my wife. Mara stared at him. Not for real, he added quickly. Just in appearance. If anyone comes asking, you're not some woman I'm hiding. You're my wife. Been here all winter. Nothing to report. You think they'll believe that? Why wouldn't they? Men marry, women come to live with them. It's normal. Nothing about this situation is normal. No, but it's plausible. And plausible might be enough to make them look elsewhere. Mara thought about it, tried to find the holes. What if they ask questions? Want proof? We give them a story. Met you in Whitefish last fall. Married quick because winter was coming. You've been here ever since. And if they don't buy it, then we deal with it. But at least this way, we're not just hiding. We're giving them a reason why you're here that doesn't involve bounty or debt. It was insane, desperate. It might work. All right, Mara said. What do I need to do? They spent the next 2 days preparing. Colt moved some of her things into the cabin. Not much, just enough to look lived in. A spare dress on a peg. Her brush by the wash basin. Small signs that a woman shared the space. Too much looks suspicious, Colt said. Too little looks fake. We need just enough. He also taught her details. How long they'd supposedly been married, where they'd supposedly met, what her story was before that. Keep it simple, he said. Simple's harder to catch in lies. You grew up in Billings, lost your parents young, worked as a seamstress until you met me. That's it. Don't elaborate unless they push. And if they push, then you get emotional, upset. Women are allowed to be upset. It makes men uncomfortable, makes them stop asking questions. That's manipulative. That's survival. They practiced. Colt would fire questions at her, trying to trip her up, and Mara would answer with the story they'd built. After a while, it started to feel almost real. Better, Colt said after one session. You almost believe it yourself. Is that good? It's necessary. A week passed, then another. No one came. The waiting was worse than the confrontations. Every sound made Mara jump. Every shadow looked like a rider. She slept with the rifle beside her bed now, one hand always touching it. Colt noticed her fraying. You need to relax, he said one evening. I am relaxed. You're wound tighter than a spring. You keep this up, you'll snap before anyone even shows up. I'm fine. You're not. He stood. Come on. Where? Outside. It's dark. Exactly. He led her out into the night. The sky was clear for once, stars scattered thick as salt. The moon was nearly full, turning the snow blue-silver. Look up, Colt said. Mara did. The stars were incredible, more than she'd ever seen. So many they seemed to blur together, forming rivers of light across the darkness. You ever see anything like that in the city? Colt asked. No. That's why I stay up here. Not for the isolation, not to hide, for that. He pointed at the sky. Reminds me how small everything is. How small we are. Makes problems feel smaller, too. Mara stared at the stars, tried to let them make her feel small, tried to let the vastness take her fear. It almost worked. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not handing me over, for helping me, for... She struggled for words. For making me feel like I'm worth fighting for. Colt was quiet for a moment. Everyone's worth fighting for, Mara. You just spent too long around people who made you think otherwise. Maybe. They stood in silence, breathing frost, watching stars. Then Colt's hand found hers. Just for a moment. Just long enough to squeeze once. We'll get through this, he said. Mara wanted to believe him. Cutter came back 3 days later. Mid-morning, no warning, just hoofbeats, and then he was there, riding into the yard with 2 other men flanking him. Mara was inside the cabin this time, washing dishes. She saw them through the window and her hands froze in the water. Colt, she called. He came from the loft, took one look, and his whole body went rigid. Remember the plan, he said quietly. You're my wife. You've been here all winter. Nothing strange about it. There's 3 of them. I can count. He moved to the door. Stay calm. Follow my lead. He stepped outside. Mara dried her hands and followed, her heart trying to break through her ribs. Cutter sat his horse, smiling. The 2 men with him looked hard and professional. Hired guns, both of them. Mr. Rainer, Cutter said pleasantly. Good to see you again. Can't say the same. No? That's unfriendly, especially since I brought friends. He gestured at the men. Thought maybe you'd be more cooperative with witnesses. Witnesses to what? To you harboring a fugitive. Cutter's eyes slid to Mara. And who's this? Mara felt his gaze like a physical thing, assessing, calculating. My wife, Colt said. His hand found Mara's, pulled her close. Mara Rainer. Your wife. Cutter's smile widened. Funny. Last time I was here, you didn't mention a wife. You didn't ask. Didn't I? I could have sworn I asked if you were alone up here. And I am, alone with my wife, like I said. Cutter dismounted, slowly, deliberately. Walked closer until he was standing just a few feet away. His eyes never left Mara's face. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Rainer, he said. Mara forced herself to nod, to meet his eyes, to not run. When'd you 2 get married? Cutter asked. October, Colt said without hesitation. Right before the first snow. Quick courtship. Winter doesn't wait. No, it doesn't. Cutter circled them slowly. Mara could feel his attention like a blade against her spine. You from around here, Mrs. Rainer? She opened her mouth, closed it. Her mind went blank. She's from Billings, Colt said. Came to Whitefish looking for work. We met. Things happen fast. Things do tend to happen fast when winter's coming. Cutter stopped in front of Mara again. You don't talk much, do you? Her voice came out rough. She swallowed. I'm not used to strangers. That's so. Shy type? Cautious type. Can't blame you for that. It's dangerous up here. All sorts of predators. His smile never wavered. You ever been to St. Louis, Mrs. Rainer? Mara's blood went cold. No, she said. You sure? Never been there? Not even passing through? I'm sure. Interesting, because you look awful familiar, like maybe I've seen your face before. Maybe on a... Colt stepped between them. That's enough. Is it? Cutter's hand moved to his coat. Because I think your wife's lying. I think she's exactly who I'm looking for, and I think you know it. I think you need to leave, now. Or what? You'll shoot me? Shoot all three of us? Cutter laughed. You're outnumbered, friend. And outgunned. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to step aside, I'm going to take the woman, and nobody needs to die today. She's not going anywhere. That's not your choice to make. Like hell it isn't. She's my wife. You want her, you go through me. That can be arranged. The two hired guns dismounted, started spreading out, flanking them. Mara's hand moved toward the rifle leaning beside the door. Don't, Colt said quietly. Not to her, to Cutter. You pull iron on my land, someone's dying, maybe me, maybe you, maybe all of us. That what Greer's paying you for? To start a war over one woman? He's paying me enough. Not enough to die for. You sure about that? They stared at each other. The whole world balanced on a knife's edge. Then Cutter moved, fast, grabbed Mara's arm and yanked her forward, trying to pull her away from Colt. Mara reacted without thinking, drove her elbow back into his ribs, heard him grunt, felt his grip loosen. She twisted free. Colt was already moving, slammed Cutter against the cabin wall hard enough to crack wood, got his forearm across the man's throat. She's mine, Colt snarled. You understand? Mine. Under my protection. You touch her again, I'll kill you. The two hired guns drew their pistols. Mara dove for the rifle, came up with it aimed at the nearest one. Her hands were shaking, but her aim was steady. Drop it, she said. The man looked at her, looked at Colt, looked at Cutter pinned against the wall. Nobody moved. This is insane, one of the hired guns said finally. We're not dying for this. Damn right you're not, Colt said. He pressed harder on Cutter's throat. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back on those horses, you're going to ride down this mountain, and you're going to tell Marcus Greer that Mara Dorsey doesn't exist anymore. She's Mara Rainer now. My wife. Under my protection. And if he wants her, he'll have to send an army. He might, Cutter choked out. Let him try. I've fought armies before. Colt released him, stepped back. Cutter doubled over, coughing. Get out, Colt said. The hired guns were already backing toward their horses. Cutter straightened slowly, rubbing his throat. His eyes promised murder. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, it is. Greer doesn't give up. Neither do I. Cutter mounted his horse. The three men wheeled around and rode out, snow flying from the hooves. Mara kept the rifle raised until they disappeared. Then her legs gave out. She sat down hard in the snow, the rifle falling from her hands. Her whole body was shaking. She couldn't stop it. Colt was beside her in seconds. You're all right. You did good. I hit him, Mara said. The words came out disbelieving. I hit him. You did more than that. You stood your ground, didn't run, didn't freeze. I wanted to run. But you didn't. That's what matters. He helped her up, got her inside, sat her by the fire while he checked the perimeter, made sure the men were really gone. When he came back, his face was grim. They'll come back, he said. I know. With more men, better armed. I know. We need to be ready. How? We can't fight an army. Colt was quiet for a long moment. Maybe we don't have to fight them. Maybe we just have to survive them. What's the difference? Fighting means standing in the open and trading bullets. Surviving means making it too expensive for them to keep trying, making this mountain into something they can't conquer. How? I'll show you. He led her outside, down past the barn, into the forest where the ground started to slope. See that path? He pointed. Leads down the mountain, only way up here on horseback. So we make it impassable. We rig it, traps, deadfalls, things that'll make them think twice about riding up here. That'll just make them angrier. Maybe, but it'll also make them slower, more careful. And careful men make mistakes. Mara looked at the path, at the trees, at the mountain that had become her fortress. When do we start? She asked. Colt smiled. Now. They worked through the night, set tripwires across the path, built deadfalls from logs and rope, marked false trails that led to cliff edges, created obstacles that looked natural but would slow horses to a crawl. The goal isn't to kill them, Colt explained. It's to make them paranoid, make them think every step might be their last. Men can't fight when they're scared. By dawn, the path was a maze of hidden dangers. They stood at the cabin looking down at their work. Think it'll be enough? Mara asked. No, Colt said honestly. But it's a start. What else? We fortify the cabin, board up windows we don't need, create fallback positions, make them fight for every inch. And if they get inside, then we use the tunnel. What tunnel? He led her to the back of the cabin, showed her a trapdoor hidden under a pile of firewood, pulled it open to reveal a narrow passage descending into darkness. Root cellar, Colt said. But it connects to an old mine shaft, goes back into the mountain, comes out about a quarter-mile north. An escape route. A last resort. If everything goes wrong, we go down there. Wait them out. Mara stared into the darkness. How long can we survive down there? Long enough. I got supplies stored, water, food, blankets. You've been planning this. I've been ready for this. There's a difference. He closed the trapdoor. I told you. I know what it's like to be hunted. I wasn't going to make the same mistakes twice. What mistakes? He didn't answer, just covered the trapdoor with wood again and walked away. Mara stood there, looking at the hidden entrance, understanding something new about the man who'd saved her. He wasn't just a hermit who'd chosen isolation. He was a survivor who'd built a fortress. And now she was part of it. They came back 4 days later, not during the day, not with warnings or conversation. They came at night. Mara woke to the sound of horses screaming. She was on her feet before she was fully conscious, hand finding the rifle in the darkness. Outside, orange light flickered against the cabin walls. Fire. Colt! She shouted. He was already up, already moving. The barn. They're burning the barn. They ran outside into chaos. Flames crawled up the barn's western wall, fed by wind and dry wood. The horses inside were panicking, crashing against their stalls. Smoke billowed black against the night sky. Get the animals out, Colt yelled. He was running toward the barn with a bucket. I'll fight the fire. Mara didn't think, just ran, shoved open the barn door and was hit by heat and smoke. The horses were wild with terror, eyes rolling white. She grabbed the nearest halter, tried to lead the horse out, but it reared and nearly knocked her down. Come on, she screamed at it. Come on! The horse bolted past her, out into the night. The second horse was worse. Trapped in its stall, the door jammed. Mara could hear it throwing itself against the walls. She grabbed the door and pulled. It didn't budge. Smoke was filling her lungs, making her eyes water, making it hard to see. She braced her foot against the wall and pulled again. Something in her shoulder popped, but the door flew open. The horse charged out, nearly trampling her. Behind her, part of the roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. Mara turned and ran, made it outside just as the whole structure groaned. Colt was there, grabbing her arm, pulling her back as the barn's wall buckled and fell inward. The chickens, Mara gasped. They're still gone, Colt said. His face was black with soot. All dead. They stood watching the barn burn. There was nothing they could do now. The fire had taken hold completely, turning the building into a skeleton of flame. Where are they? Mara asked. Watching. Somewhere out there. Colt's hand was tight on his rifle. This wasn't about burning the barn. It was about drawing us out. As if in answer, something whistled past Mara's ear and punched into the cabin wall behind her. Gunshot. Down! Colt tackled her into the snow. Another shot cracked the air above them. They crawled behind the water trough. Mara's heart was trying to break through her ribs. How many? She asked. Can't tell. At least 3. Maybe more. Colt rose slightly, fired twice into the darkness. They're in the tree line, using the fire for light. We're sitting ducks out here. I know. He grabbed her hand. On 3, we run for the cabin. You go first. I'll cover. Colt. 1. Another bullet hit the trough. Water started leaking out, freezing as it hit the ground. 2. I'm not leaving you. 3. Go. Mara ran, heard Colt's rifle firing behind her, felt bullets tear the air around her. The cabin door was so far away, 20 feet, 15, 10. Something slammed into her left arm. She stumbled but kept running, hit the door hard, crashed through it, fell to the floor inside. Colt dove in behind her, slammed the door, started dragging furniture against it. You hit? He asked without looking at her. Mara looked at her arm. Blood was spreading through her sleeve. Maybe. Maybe? He turned, saw the blood. His face went white. Christ, Mara. It's not that bad. Let me see. She let him peel back her sleeve. The bullet had carved a furrow through the meat of her upper arm, deep enough to bleed heavy, but not deep enough to have hit bone. Through and through, Colt said. You're lucky. Doesn't feel lucky. He grabbed a cloth, pressed it hard against the wound. Mara hissed in pain. Hold this, he said. Keep pressure on it. I need to check the windows. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. The barn was still burning, casting wild shadows across the snow. They're regrouping, Colt said. He was at the window, rifle ready, figuring out their next move. What do we do? We wait. They want us panicked, want us to make mistakes. I'd say burning our barn counts as panic-worthy. Yeah, it does. His jaw was tight. But we can't give them what they want. Silence stretched. Mara kept pressure on her arm, watching Colt watch the darkness. The fire outside was starting to die down now. The barn was mostly gone, just a few walls still standing, surrounded by glowing embers. Then she heard it, a voice calling from the darkness. Rainer! Colt didn't respond. Rainer, I know you can hear me. It was Cutter, sounding amused, confident. You cost me 3 men on those traps of yours. Real clever, but it's over now. We got you surrounded, got your barn burning, got your woman bleeding. How long you think you can hold out? Long enough, Colt shouted back. Long enough for what? For her to die from that wound? For you to starve? Winter's not over, friend. You got months left up here. We got all the time in the world. Then you'll be waiting a long time. Don't have to wait. We can end this now. You send out the woman, we leave. Simple as that. You can keep your cabin, keep your life. Just give us what we came for. Colt looked at Mara. His eyes asked the question he wouldn't say out loud. No, she said. Mara, no. I didn't survive this long just to give up now. You're bleeding. I'll live. You don't know that. Neither do you, but I know what happens if I go out there, and I'd rather die in here with you than... She stopped. Started again. I'm not going out there. Colt held her gaze for a long moment. Then he turned back to the window. She's not coming out, he yelled, laughter from the darkness. Then I guess we do this the hard way. Hope you said your prayers, Rainer. Silence fell again. Mara finished bandaging her arm as best she could. The bleeding had slowed but hadn't stopped. Her head felt light. She wasn't sure if it was from blood loss or fear. How's our ammunition? She asked. Colt checked. Enough. For now. Water? Barrel inside should last us a few days. Food? Week. Maybe 2 if we're careful. So we can wait them out. Maybe, if they don't burn us out first. As if summoning it, something crashed through the window. Glass shattered. Mara saw it rolling across the floor, a bottle with a burning rag stuffed in the top. Firebomb! Colt dove for it, grabbed it, threw it back out the window in one smooth motion. It exploded outside in a ball of flame. Another bottle came through a different window, then another. Colt was moving, throwing them back out as fast as they came in. But one got past him, hit the floor near the stove, shattered, spread fire across the wooden planks. Mara grabbed a blanket and beat at the flames. The smoke was choking her, making her eyes stream. She kept hitting the fire until it was out, then looked up to see 3 more bottles arcing through the windows. The cellar, Colt shouted. We have to go down. What about now? He was already dragging the firewood away from the trapdoor. Mara helped him, her wounded arm screaming in protest. They got the door open, and Colt dropped down first, reaching up for her. Come on! Mara grabbed the rifle and ammunition, looked around the cabin one last time. The fire was spreading fast now, catching on curtains, climbing walls. Everything they'd fought to protect was burning. She dropped through the trap door. Colt caught her, steadied her, pulled the door shut above them. Darkness. Complete and absolute. Don't move, Colt said. She heard him fumbling for something. Then light flared. A lantern, turning the tunnel walls orange. This way! The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for Mara's shoulders. The ceiling was low enough that Colt had to hunch. They moved deeper into the mountain, away from the cabin, the walls pressing close on both sides. How far does this go? Mara asked. 1/4 mile, maybe more. And it's safe. Safer than up there. Behind them, she could hear muffled sounds, shouting, more glass breaking, the cabin dying. They kept moving. The air got colder as they went deeper, staler. Mara's breath fogged in the lantern light. Her arm throbbed with each heartbeat. After what felt like hours but was probably minutes, the tunnel opened into a wider space, the old mine shaft Colt had mentioned. Support beams held up the ceiling. Crates were stacked against the walls. This is it, Colt said. He set the lantern down and immediately started checking the supplies. We got water, food, blankets, enough to last a while. How long? Long as we need to. Mara sat down heavily on a crate. Now that they'd stopped moving, the adrenaline was wearing off. Her arm hurt bad. Her whole body hurt. She was covered in soot and blood, and her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Let me see that arm, Colt said. She let him unwrap the bandage. Blood had soaked through completely. In the lantern light, the wound looked worse, edges ragged, still seeping red. Need stitches, Colt said. You know how to do that? Yeah, done it before. On myself, mostly. He was digging through one of the crates. Came up with a bottle, needle, and thread. This is gonna hurt. More than getting shot? Probably. He poured whiskey over the needle and thread, then over the wound. Mara bit down on her lip hard enough to taste blood. Ready? Colt asked. No. He started stitching anyway. Mara focused on breathing, on not passing out, on anything except the needle pulling through her skin. Colt worked quickly, his hands steady despite everything. Where'd you learn this? She asked through gritted teeth. Army. You learn a lot when you're patching up soldiers in the field. You were a medic? Sometimes. When we lost the real medic. He tied off the last stitch, wrapped the wound in clean cloth. There, should hold. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We're not out of this. He was right. They were trapped underground while men with guns waited above. The cabin was probably gone by now. The barn was definitely gone. All their supplies, their shelter, everything they'd built. Ash. What now? Mara asked. Colt sat down across from her. In the lamplight, he looked older, tired. Now we wait. Let them think they won. Let them search the ruins. When they don't find bodies, they'll start looking, but they won't find this entrance. I made sure of that. How long do we wait? Until they leave. Or until we can't wait anymore. And then? Then we figure out what's left. Silence fell between them. Mara could hear water dripping somewhere deeper in the mine, could hear her own heartbeat loud in her ears. I'm sorry, she said finally. For what? For all of this. For bringing this down on you, for, her voice cracked, for costing you everything. You didn't cost me anything. Your cabin, it can be rebuilt. The barn, wood and nails, that's all. But, Mara, he looked at her, really looked at her. Buildings burn, possessions get destroyed. None of that matters. What matters is we're still alive, still fighting. For how long? As long as it takes. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe they could survive this. But sitting in the dark, wounded and exhausted, with killers hunting them above, it was hard to have faith. Get some rest, Colt said. He was pulling blankets from a crate. I'll keep watch. You need to rest too. I will. After. He spread a blanket on the ground for her. Mara lay down, every muscle protesting. The ground was hard and cold, but she was so tired it didn't matter. Colt? She said into the darkness. Yeah? Why are you doing this? Really? He was quiet for a long time. Because I know what it's like to be hunted. To feel like the whole world wants you dead. And I swore, when I got out of that, if I ever had the chance to help someone else in the same situation. He stopped. I wouldn't walk away. What were you running from? Doesn't matter now. It's done. Is it? Has to be. Can't run forever, Mara. Eventually you have to turn around and fight. Is that what we're doing? Fighting? No, we're surviving. There's a difference. Mara closed her eyes. Let exhaustion pull her down. She didn't know how long she slept. Time moved strangely in the darkness. But when she woke, Colt was still sitting against the wall, rifle across his lap, watching the tunnel entrance. Anything? She asked. No, it's quiet up there. Too quiet? Maybe. Or maybe they think we're dead. Are we going to check? Not yet. Give it more time. Mara sat up slowly. Her arm hurt, but the bleeding had stopped. She was thirsty, hungry, but mostly she was restless. The waiting was worse than the running. Tell me about the army, she said. Colt glanced at her. Why? Because I want to know, because we're stuck down here and I'm going crazy sitting still, because, she shrugged with her good shoulder, because I want to know who you really are. You know who I am. I know the hermit who lives on a mountain. I don't know the soldier who learned to stitch wounds. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I enlisted young, thought I was going to be a hero, going to fight for something that mattered. He laughed, bitter. Turns out war's not about heroes. It's about surviving, about doing what you're told even when it's wrong, about watching friends die for reasons nobody can explain. What happened? What always happens. We won some battles, lost others. I got good at killing people, real good. And then one day I realized I didn't know how to do anything else. He looked at his hands. So I left. Came up here. Built that cabin as far from people as I could get. But you still helped me. Yeah. Why? Because maybe helping you helps me remember I'm not just a killer. Maybe it means something I did actually mattered. He met her eyes. Or maybe I'm just too stubborn to let men like Greer win. Mara understood that, the stubbornness. The refusal to give up even when every logical part of you said you should. We're going to make it, she said. Yeah? Yeah. We're too stubborn to die. Colt almost smiled. Hope you're right. They waited another day in the darkness, rationed water and ate cold beans from tins, took turns sleeping while the other kept watch, listened for sounds from above but heard nothing. Finally, Colt decided it was time. I'm going up, he said. Check the situation. You stay here. Like hell. I'm coming with you. Mara, you're not going alone. What if they're waiting? What if it's a trap? Then you being there won't help. It might. 2 guns are better than 1. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. Fine, but you stay behind me. And if I say run, you run. Understand? Understood. They made their way back through the tunnel, slowly, quietly. Colt had the rifle ready. Mara had her pistol, smaller, easier to handle with one good arm. The tunnel seemed longer going back, or maybe she was just more aware of how far underground they were, how much earth and rock stood between them and escape. Finally, they reached the trapdoor. Colt pressed his ear against it, listening. After a minute, he looked at Mara and nodded. He pushed the door open an inch, peered out, then wider. Daylight flooded in, clean and bright. Colt climbed out first, disappeared from view. Mara waited, heart pounding, until his hand reached back down. "Come on," he said quietly. "But be ready." She climbed up into devastation. The cabin was gone, not damaged, gone. Burned to the foundation, nothing left but ash and the stone chimney standing like a grave marker. The barn was the same, just charred posts and twisted metal. Everything they'd built, everything they'd fought for. Ash. Mara stood in the ruins, unable to process it. "They're gone," Colt said. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, looking at tracks in the snow. "Left this morning, looks like." "They think we're dead." "Yeah. Probably found the horses running loose, no bodies in the cabin. Figured we died in the fire or the tunnel collapsed on us." "Good. Is it?" Colt turned back to the ruins. "We got no shelter, no supplies. Winter's not over. We might have survived them, but that doesn't mean we'll survive this." He was right. The temperature was already dropping. Night would bring cold that would kill them without shelter. "What do we do?" Mara asked. Colt looked at the mountains, at the sky, at the ruins of everything he'd built. "We survive," he said, "like we always do." They spent what was left of the day salvaging what they could. Most of it was destroyed, but some things had survived. Tools buried in snow, canned goods that hadn't burst from heat, metal implements that couldn't burn. "The root cellar?" Colt said suddenly. "What?" "Under the cabin. It's stone. Might have protected what was inside." They dug through ash and debris until they found it. A stone-lined pit that had been beneath the cabin floor. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was food, flour, salt, dried meat. Not enough for the whole winter, but enough. "We can make it," Colt said. He was already planning, his mind working through problems. "We'll use the mine shaft for shelter tonight. Tomorrow we start rebuilding." "Rebuilding what? We have axes, saws. Nails survived in the tool shed. It's stone, mostly intact. We have our hands. That's enough." To build a whole cabin before we freeze? To build shelter. Doesn't have to be pretty, just has to keep us alive. Mara looked at him. At this man who refused to quit even when everything was ash, who was already planning their survival instead of mourning their loss. And something in her chest loosened. They were alive. That was all that mattered. "All right," she said. "Where do we start?" They built the first shelter in 3 days. It wasn't much. 4 walls of rough logs, a roof of salvaged tin and bark, gaps chinked with mud and moss, no windows, one door that didn't quite fit its frame, but it kept out the wind, kept out the snow, kept them alive. Mara worked until her hands bled, until her wounded arm screamed and her back felt like it might break. And then she worked more. Because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering everything they'd lost. Colt worked beside her without complaint, without rest. His face was set in permanent concentration, solving problems as they appeared. When a log wouldn't fit, he carved it until it did. When the roof leaked, he patched it. When Mara's strength gave out, he took her load without comment. On the 4th day, they had fire inside the shelter. On the 5th, they brought down the supplies from the mine. On the 6th, Mara woke to silence. No wind, no snow falling, just quiet. She pushed open the door and stepped outside into a world transformed. The sun was out, actually out, not hidden behind gray clouds. The air still bit cold but felt different somehow, softer, like winter was finally loosening its grip. "Spring's coming," Colt said from behind her. Mara turned. He was standing in the doorway, looking at the sky with an expression she'd never seen before. Something almost like hope. "How long?" she asked. "Month? Maybe 6 weeks? Snow will start melting, trails will open. We can leave." "Yeah, if we want to." The words hung between them. If we want to. Mara looked at the ruins of the cabin, at the shelter they'd built from nothing, at the mountain that had tried to kill them and failed. "Where would we go?" she asked. "I don't know. West, maybe. Canada? Somewhere Greer's reach doesn't extend. You think that place exists? Has to. World's big enough. Is it though? Feels like everywhere I run, someone's waiting. Colt was quiet for a moment. Then, maybe it's time to stop running. And do what? Stay here? Build another cabin and wait for them to come back? They won't come back. They think we're dead. For now. But Cutter survived. He knows the truth. Eventually he'll tell someone. Let him. By the time anyone comes looking again, we'll be long gone. Or we'll be ready, Mara said. Colt looked at her sharply. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting men like Greer decide where I can go and what I can do. She met his eyes. You said eventually you have to turn around and fight. Maybe it's time. Fighting means going back, confronting him directly. I know. That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to be free. Colt shook his head. Greer's got money, power, protection. We walk into St. Louis trying to take him down, we'll be dead before we reach his door. So we don't go to St. Louis. We make him come to us. He already came. We barely survived it. Because we were hiding, defending. Mara felt something crystallizing in her mind, something hard and certain. What if we went on offense? What if we made him pay for sending those men? Made it so expensive, so dangerous that he decides I'm not worth it? How? I don't know yet, but there has to be a way, some leverage, some weakness. She was pacing now, thinking out loud. Men like Greer, they're powerful because everyone's afraid of them. But fear only works if you're afraid to hit back. And you're not afraid? I'm terrified, but I'm more afraid of spending the rest of my life running. Colt watched her pace. Some emotion she couldn't read crossed his face. You really want to do this? I want to be free. Actually free. Not hiding, not looking over my shoulder. Free. She stopped, looked at him. But I can't do it alone. No, you can't. So will you help me? He didn't answer right away, just stood there, looking at her like he was seeing something new, something he hadn't expected. Finally he said, Yeah, I'll help you. Why? Because you're right, can't run forever, and I'm tired too. He stepped closer. But we do this smart. We plan. We prepare. We don't move until we're sure. Agreed. And if it goes wrong, it won't. If it goes wrong, he repeated firmly, you run. You don't try to save me. You don't look back. You run, and you keep running. Promise me. Colt, promise me, Mara. She looked at him, at this man who'd risked everything for her, who'd lost everything for her, who was still standing beside her anyway. I promise, she lied. They spent the next week gathering information. Colt made a trip down to Whitefish, careful, cautious, watching for signs of Cutter or his men. He came back with newspapers and gossip. Greer's in trouble, Colt said, spreading the papers on their makeshift table. Business trouble. Some investment went bad, lost a lot of money. How much? Enough that people are talking, enough that he's looking vulnerable. Mara scanned the articles. Greer's name appeared several times, always with words like setback and unexpected losses. One piece mentioned creditors circling. He's weak right now, she said. Relatively, he's still got resources, still dangerous. But less dangerous than before. And if he's worried about money, maybe... She stopped, an idea forming. What if we make it worse? How? I don't know yet, but men with money problems get desperate, make mistakes. What if we could push him into a mistake big enough to finish him? Colt leaned back. You're talking about destroying him. I'm talking about making sure he never comes after anyone else. That's a tall order. I know, but think about it. He sent how many men after me? 4? 5? Each one cost money, equipment, bribes, and for what? He got nothing. Lost men, lost time, lost money he apparently can't afford to lose. So we make him lose more. We make him lose everything. It was ambitious, probably crazy, but Mara felt it settling into place like puzzle pieces finally fitting together. They needed information. Details about Greer's business, his debts, his vulnerabilities. They needed allies, people who'd suffered under Greer's hand and wanted revenge. And they needed a plan that didn't get them both killed. I know someone, Colt said slowly, in Missoula. Used to work intelligence during the war. Owes me a favor. Can we trust him? Far as I can trust anyone. Then we start there. They left 3 days later. The journey down the mountain was treacherous, snow melting into mud, trails washing out, ice hidden under slush. But they moved carefully, quietly, watching for signs of watchers. Nothing. The mountain let them go. Missoula was bigger than Whitefish, rougher, the kind of town where you could disappear if you needed to or find trouble if you wanted it. Colt led them to a building on the edge of town. 2 stories, faded paint, windows covered with newspaper. This is it? Mara asked. Don't judge by appearances. He knocked a pattern on the door. 3 short, 2 long. Waited. The door opened a crack. An eye appeared. Looked at Colt. Widened. Rainer? That really you? Yeah, Hayes. It's me. The door swung open. The man behind it was small and wiry, maybe 50, with eyes that missed nothing. Thought you were dead. Heard you disappeared into the mountains, and that was that. Still alive. Barely. Colt stepped inside, gestured to Mara. This is Mara. She needs help. Hayes looked at her. Really looked. What kind of help? The kind you specialize in. Information. Leverage. Ways to destroy a man who needs destroying. That's a big ask. I know, but you owe me. Saved your life once doesn't mean I owe you forever. You saved mine once. I saved yours twice. By my count, you still owe me one. Hayes grunted, but he stepped aside to let them in. Who's the target? Marcus Greer, St. Louis. Hayes whistled low. You don't aim small, do you? You know him? Know of him. Businessman. Owns half the factories in St. Louis. Other half wishes they were him. Hayes moved to a desk covered with papers. What'd he do? Mara spoke up. He thinks he owns me. Wants to collect on a debt that isn't mine. And you want to what? Disappear? Change your name? I want to end him. Hayes looked at her differently now. That's ambitious. It's necessary. Okay. Hayes started pulling files from drawers. Give me a few days, I'll see what I can dig up. But this won't be cheap. We don't have money, Colt said. Then what do you have? Information about supply routes through the mountains, smuggling paths the army doesn't know about. Hayes stopped, looked at Colt. You'd give that up? For this? Yeah. Must be one hell of a debt. It is. They stayed in Missoula while Hayes worked. Mara felt exposed here. Too many people, too many eyes. Every stranger could be one of Greer's men. Every glance felt like recognition. But days passed, and nothing happened. On the 4th day, Hayes called them back. Found something, he said. He spread papers across the desk. Greer's in deeper trouble than the newspapers know. He owes money to some very bad people, Chicago people, the kind who don't accept excuses. How much does he owe? Mara asked. 100,000. Due in 3 months. Colt whistled. He can't pay that. No, which is why he's liquidating assets, selling properties, calling in every debt he's owed. Hayes looked at Mara. Including yours. My father owed him 5,000, Mara said. That's nothing compared to 100,000. True. But Greer's not thinking straight right now. He's desperate, grasping at anything that might save him, that makes him dangerous but also predictable. How do we use that? Colt asked. Hayes pulled out another document. This is a list of everyone who owes Greer money, or thinks they do. Some of these debts are legitimate. Most aren't. He's been running a scheme for years, loaning money at reasonable rates, then claiming the person owes triple what they actually borrowed. Uses forged documents. Intimidation. Most people just pay rather than fight. That's how he got my father, Mara said quietly. Probably. But here's the thing. If enough of these people got together, compared notes, they'd realize they're all getting cheated. And if that information went public, went to the Chicago people, Greer owes, they'd know he's a fraud, Colt finished. They'd know he's been inflating his assets, lying about what he's worth. Exactly. And men like that don't forgive being lied to. Mara felt hope flicker. So we expose him. Show everyone he's been cheating them. It's not that simple, Hayes warned. You'd need proof, real proof, documents, witnesses willing to testify. And you'd need to do it all without Greer finding out and killing you first. Can we get that proof? Maybe. I know a few people on this list, people who'd want revenge if they knew the truth. Getting them to work together, getting the documents, that'll take time. How much time? Month. Maybe 2. Mara looked at Colt. He nodded slightly. Do it, she said. Hayes started making contacts. Quiet conversations with people who'd been ruined by Greer, people who'd lost businesses, homes, family members, people who wanted justice but didn't know how to get it. Slowly, they started to come together. A factory owner who'd lost everything to one of Greer's loans. A widow whose husband had died in one of Greer's buildings. Unsafe conditions Greer had known about and ignored. A banker who'd been fired for questioning Greer's accounting. Each one had a piece of the puzzle. Each one wanted revenge. We need to be careful, Hayes kept saying. Greer's got eyes everywhere. Word gets back to him, he'll bury all of us. They were careful, met in secret, used codes, trusted no one outside their small circle, and slowly the case against Marcus Greer built. 6 weeks after they'd arrived in Missoula, Hayes spread the final documents across his desk. This is it, he said. Everything we need. Forged loan agreements, false accounting, witness statements, evidence he's been lying to his creditors about his assets. Mara looked at the papers. Years of lies and theft, all documented, all provable. What do we do with it? She asked. We give it to the Chicago people. Let them handle Greer their way. That's murder, Colt said quietly. That's justice, Hayes corrected, or as close as we're going to get. Mara picked up one of the documents. Her father's name was on it. The amount he'd supposedly owed, $15,000. 3 times what he'd actually borrowed. This lie had destroyed her life, had sent her running, had nearly killed her. Do it, she said. Hayes sent the documents to Chicago through channels Mara didn't ask about. They waited. 2 weeks later, newspapers started reporting that Marcus Greer had disappeared. His offices were ransacked, his properties seized, his associates arrested or vanished. The St. Louis police were investigating but had no leads. He's dead, Hayes said, reading the latest article. Or wishes he was. Either way, he's done. Won't be coming after anyone anymore. Mara sat with that information, tried to feel something. Relief, victory, satisfaction. Mostly, she just felt tired. It's over, Colt said quietly. Yeah, it is. You're free. She looked at him. We're free. Something passed between them. Understanding, acknowledgement of everything they'd survived together. What now? Hayes asked. Good question. They could go anywhere, do anything. The world was open in a way it hadn't been since Mara's father died. I don't know, Mara admitted. I spent so long running, I never thought about what I'd do if I stopped. You could stay here, Hayes offered. Missoula's not bad. Plenty of work. I hate cities, Mara said. Then don't stay in the city. Colt was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Come back up the mountain. There's nothing left up there. There's us. There's the land. There's... He stopped, started again. There's a future, if you want it. Mara's heart did something complicated in her chest. You want me to stay? I want you to choose. For the first time in your life, actually choose what you want. What did she want? She thought about the mountain, the cold, the work, the isolation. She thought about Colt, about the way he'd stood beside her when he had every reason to walk away, about quiet evenings by the fire and shared silences that didn't feel lonely. She thought about being strong, about learning that her body wasn't weakness but survival, about proving everyone wrong who'd ever looked at her and decided she wouldn't last. I want... She paused, let herself feel the truth of it. I want to go home. The mountain? Yeah, the mountain. Colt smiled, actually smiled. Okay, then let's go home. They left Missoula the next morning. The journey back took longer. They weren't running anymore, weren't afraid of being followed. They could take their time, stop when they wanted, sleep without one eye open. It felt like freedom. Spring had truly arrived by the time they reached the mountain. Snow was melting fast, turning trails to rivers. Green was starting to show through the brown. The air smelled different, alive. The ruins of the cabin looked smaller somehow, less tragic, just wood and stone waiting to be rebuilt. "We could fix the original spot," Colt said, "or build somewhere new." Somewhere new, Mara decided. Start fresh. Where? She walked the property, looking with new eyes. Found a spot higher up with better protection from wind, better drainage, better view of the approach. Anyone coming up that mountain they'd see from half a mile away. "Here," she said. "You're sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure." They started the next day. This time they had time to do it right, to build walls that would last, to plan for expansion, to make something permanent. Mara worked differently now, not just trying to survive, but trying to build. She was stronger than she'd been that first day, muscles harder, hands tougher, mind clearer. She could split wood all day without breaking, could haul logs that would have crushed her 6 months ago. Colt noticed. "You've changed," he said one evening. They were sitting on what would eventually be the porch, watching the sun set over the valley. "Have I?" "Yeah, you're—" He searched for words. "Harder. In a good way." "I had to be." "No, you chose to be. There's a difference." Maybe he was right. Somewhere between that first train ride and now, Mara had stopped being the woman running from debt, stopped being a victim of circumstances beyond her control. She'd become someone who built things, who fought for things, who stood her ground. "You've changed too," she said. "How?" "You smile now, sometimes." "Do I?" "Yeah, you do." He was quiet for a moment, then, "Haven't had much to smile about until recently." "What changed?" "You came, turned everything upside down, nearly got me killed." He looked at her. "Best thing that ever happened to me." Mara felt heat in her chest. "That's a low bar." "Maybe, but it's true anyway." They sat in comfortable silence, watching light fade from the sky. Somewhere in the forest, an owl called. The creek below ran loud with snowmelt. "Mara?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you stayed." "Me too." The cabin took shape slowly. One wall, then another, roof beams raised, windows fitted, a door that actually closed properly. It wasn't perfect. Gaps still showed where they'd measured wrong. The floor wasn't quite level. One corner sat lower than the others. But it was theirs. They moved in on a day in early May when the sun was warm and the last snow had finally melted from the high peaks. Mara stood in the doorway of the new cabin, looking at the space they'd created from nothing. 2 rooms instead of 1. A sleeping loft. A real stove. Windows that caught morning light. Home. "What do you think?" Colt asked. "I think we did good." "Yeah?" "Yeah." He came to stand beside her. They looked at their work together. "I was thinking," Colt said carefully, "about that wife story, the one we told Cutter." Mara's heart picked up speed. "What about it?" "It was a good cover, believable, kept people from asking questions." "It did. Thing is," he turned to face her, "I keep thinking maybe it shouldn't just be a cover." Mara couldn't breathe. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're already here, already living with me, already—" He stopped, started again, simpler. "I'm saying I want you to stay. Not as someone hiding, not as hired help, but as—" "Your wife?" "Yeah, my wife." Mara looked at him, at this man who'd saved her life and let her save his, who'd taught her to be strong and learn to smile again, who'd built a home with her from literal ashes. "That's not very romantic," she said. "I'm not a romantic man." "No, you're not." She stepped closer. "But you're a good man, and I—" The words caught. She forced them out. "I don't want to be anywhere else. With anyone else." "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she was something precious, like they had all the time in the world. When they broke apart, Mara was smiling, really smiling. "So what now?" she asked. "Now we live, we build, we survive." He pulled her closer. "Together." "Together," Mara agreed. Summer came soft and warm. The mountain transformed from frozen wasteland to something almost gentle. Flowers bloomed in meadows. Animals emerged from hibernation. The world felt new. Mara and Colt built a life in that newness. Planted a garden, rebuilt the barn, brought down horses from Whitefish. Good stock, strong enough for mountain work. Fixed the fences, cleared new trails. They worked side by side like they'd been doing it for years instead of months. Fell into rhythms, developed shorthand, learned each other's patterns. Some days were hard. Some days the mountain tested them. But they faced it together, and that made all the difference. In late summer, a rider came up the mountain. Mara saw him from a distance, and her first instinct was fear. But Colt touched her arm. "It's okay," he said. "That's Hayes." It was. The small man dismounted in their yard, looking around at what they'd built. "Not bad," he said. "Not bad at all." "What are you doing here?" Colt asked. "Bringing news. Thought you'd want to know. Greer's confirmed dead. They found what was left of him in the Mississippi. Case closed." Mara felt the last knot of tension in her chest loosen. "It's really over. It's really over. No one's looking for Mara Dorsey anymore. Far as the world's concerned, she died in a fire on a mountain in Montana. Good. Though..." Hayes pulled out a folded paper. "This came for you." "Well, for Mara Rainer. Figure that's you now?" Mara took the paper. It was from her father's lawyer. A short note saying her father's remaining assets, minimal though they were, had been cleared of all debt. There was a small inheritance, enough to make a difference. She showed it to Colt. He read it and smiled. "Looks like you came out ahead after all," he said. "We came out ahead." Hayes stayed for dinner, told them about Missoula, about the people they'd helped who were rebuilding their lives, about the small victory they'd won against men like Greer. "You two did good," Hayes said as he prepared to leave. "Real good. Most people in your situation wouldn't have made it." "Most people aren't as stubborn as us," Mara said. "Truth." Hayes mounted his horse. "Take care of each other." "We will." They watched him ride down the mountain until he disappeared into the trees. Then they went back inside, back to the life they were building, back to each other. That night, lying in bed with Colt beside her, Mara thought about how far she'd come. From that first day stepping off the train, soft, scared, running, to now, to this moment, to this life. She'd survived everything the mountain could throw at her, everything Greer could send after her, everything fear and doubt and exhaustion could do. And somewhere in that survival, she'd found something she never expected. She'd found home, not in a place, not even in a building, in herself, in her own strength, in the understanding that she didn't need to be smaller or quieter or different to deserve a place in the world. She was enough, exactly as she was. Colt stirred beside her. "You awake?" "Yeah." "What are you thinking about?" "How I used to think my body was the problem. That if I could just be different, smaller, lighter, more like other women, then maybe I'd be safe. Maybe I'd be worthy. And now? Now I know that's garbage. My body kept me alive. Got me through that tunnel when you couldn't fit. Survived the cold. Built this cabin. It was never the problem." She turned to look at him in the darkness. "I was strong enough all along. Just took almost dying to figure it out." Colt pulled her closer. "You're the strongest person I know." "I'm stubborn." "Same thing." Mara smiled against his shoulder. "Maybe." Outside, wind whispered through the pines. The creek sang its endless song. The mountains settled into sleep, and inside their cabin, their home, Mara and Colt did the same. Safe. Free. Together. The morning Mara realized she was completely, truly happy. The sun was streaming through the kitchen window, turning everything gold. She was kneading bread while Colt repaired a bridle at the table. Nothing special, nothing extraordinary, just life. "What are you smiling about?" Colt asked. "Nothing. Everything." She looked at him. "I'm just happy." Yeah? Yeah, is that weird? No, it's good. He set down the bridle, came to stand beside her. You deserve to be happy. So do you. I am. They stood together in the sunlight, flour on her hands, leather oil on his, the bread rising under a cloth on the counter. This was what freedom looked like. Not running, not hiding, just living, just being, just enough. And as spring turned to summer turned to fall, as the seasons cycled and the mountain wore its different faces, Mara and Colt built a life that was theirs, imperfect and hard-won and absolutely real. Some nights, Mara still dreamed about that first train ride, about stepping onto the platform and seeing Colt's doubt, about all the times she almost gave up. But she never did. And now, standing on her porch watching dawn break over the valley, feeling strong and solid and exactly where she belonged, Mara knew one thing for certain. She hadn't just survived the mountain. She'd conquered it. On her own terms. In her own way. With her own strength. And that made all the difference.